and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the future of Arapahoe County's Open Spaces program. My name is Dirk, and I'll be your moderator. Tonight, we'll take a look at the county's Open Spaces Draft Master Plan that gives a roadmap to local parks, trails, heritage areas, and open spaces that span the county's 805 square miles. We'll go over highlights of the draft plan, share some preliminary input we've received, and share some priorities for the future. If you already have a question lined up, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad and an operator will take your question. If you're listening in online, you can type your question into the question box below the video player. But first, to kick things off, let's welcome Arapahoe County Commissioner and Board Chair, Nancy Jackson.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you all for tuning in tonight. We are so pleased to be joined by staff from our Open Spaces Department, as well as the planning firm, Design Workshop. To begin with, though, I want to acknowledge that this has been a really difficult year for everyone, with all of us dealing with the challenges and impact of the pandemic. Through it all, though, one thing has become crystal clear: the immense value of our open spaces, parks, and trails. We need these precious places for our health, for our happiness, and our quality of life. And we need them now more than ever. During these rough times, we've seen record growth and interest in our outdoor spaces, with a 48% increase in the usage of county-managed trails in 2020. Given all this use, we must carefully plan for our future and work hard to protect and steward these places for generations to come. So we'd like you to get as much valuable information as possible from tonight's discussion. Stay tuned and ask any questions that you may have. And so now, let's get back to the program. We have a lot of ground to cover.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Next, let's bring on Shannon Carter, Director of the Open Spaces Program at the county. Shannon, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Dirk. I want to share some background information before we get started with the review of the master plan recommendations. I want to talk about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. Something that may surprise some to learn is that the Open Spaces program is only 18 years old as of this year. The program began in 2003 when the citizens of Arapahoe County voted to fund a quarter-cent open space sales and use tax, which amounts to 25 cents for every $100 spent in Arapahoe County. That authorization created the program that has allowed us to acquire, build, and maintain parks, trails, open spaces, and heritage areas. It's important to know that we share a portion of the tax that we receive with the 13 cities and towns within the county. So our local communities also benefit from this sales and use tax. In 2011, voters approved the renewal of the tax and extended it to 2023. We've certainly been able to accomplish a lot in the past 18 years, and I'll share with you some of the accomplishments tonight. Let's start with a brief overview of what we do. Now, most callers are familiar with their local neighborhood park, perhaps the trail that they walk or bike on, or the sports field where their kids play football, baseball, or soccer. However, if you've ever walked or biked along the South Platte River or the Highline Canal Trail, or if you've played at or taken your kids to the Aurora Sports Park, or watched a rugby game at the Infinity Park in Glendale, if you've done any of those things, you've experienced Arapahoe County open spaces. Perhaps you've taken your surfboard and surfed the Platte River. Yeah, you can actually do that. Or you've eaten a funnel cake and watched the animal competitions at the Arapahoe County Fair. Those too are examples of the Open Spaces program. We put money into each of these projects and programs, and we're also bringing multiple agencies together to accomplish bigger goals. We're keen on the power of partnerships, which allow us to do more, protect more, and be more for the communities and people we serve. This cumulative effort has evidenced by some pretty big numbers. For example, Arapahoe County owns and manages over 5,000 acres of parks, open spaces, and trail corridors. We have 4 trailheads and 2 heritage areas. the 17 Mile House Farm Park, and the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds. Our programs serve a mix of urban and rural communities that make up the county. Together with our partners, we've conserved over 31,000 acres of open space. We've built more than 70 miles of new trails and supported more than 168 parks, trailhead, and heritage area projects. How do we do it? Well, half, as we mentioned, of the sales tax revenue we receive each year, or close to about $15 million a year, is invested directly into the community through the Shareback program. Also, about $4 million goes towards grants to cities, towns, and special districts. These help to fund various recreation and outdoor programs. Each year, another 26%, or $7 million, is used for open space acquisitions, regional projects, and the building and improving of county parks and trails. The rest of the money that we received is used to maintain and operate our parks and trails, operate our fairgrounds, our 17 Mile House, as well as some of the administrative functions that are required to run the department. And of course, there are limits to how much we can allocate to each of these functions. Now that's where we've been and some of the things that we've done. But now let's look forward and look ahead to a new blueprint for our future. This draft master plan represents a year of extensive research, analysis, and community engagement. The plan updates our current master plan and helps guide our efforts through 2040 and beyond. This has been a labor of love, and I want to thank the entire project team, our partners, and all of you, our community, for your involvement and support. Now I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Dirk, and then we'll ask our planning consultants from Design Workshop to kind of walk us through this draft master plan.
Thank you, Shannon, for setting the stage for tonight's discussion. Quick reminder that if you'd like to ask a question live on this call, please dial *3 on your telephone keypad to get connected to one of our operators. Again, to ask a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. Now, let's bring on Anna Laybourne, a principal with Design Workshop.
Thank you, Dirk. We are so excited to be here tonight. Before we start with the content, we'd like to find more about you who is listening in. For our first polling question of the evening, we'd like to know, where in the county do you live? Press 1 for one of the 13 cities and towns within Arapahoe County. Press 2 for the unincorporated area, and press 3 if you do not live in Arapahoe County. And if you're watching online, you can indicate your response below the video player. So, a reminder, press 1 for the 13 cities and towns, 2 for the unincorporated area, and 3 if you do not live in the county. Great, we've got some good responses there. Looks like we have about 84% of you are from one of the cities or towns, and then 13% the unincorporated area, as well as some from outside the county. Thank you for that response. At the end of the presentation, we will open up the phone lines for your questions and for Arapahoe County staff and our consultant team to respond at that time. So we can go to the first slide about the goals for the master plan. And they include the following: creating a strategy for acquiring future properties for Arapahoe County, providing recommendations for updating land use codes, regulations to support the master plan goals, and properly stewarding and maintaining existing resources, as well as gaining support for reauthorization of the program. Our next slide shows that we are starting to engage the public since last spring, when we were undertaking the inventory and analysis public portion of this plan. Then over the summer, when we were starting to look closer at values, needs, resources, and the vision, we also engaged additional groups of residents and visitors. This winter, we dove deep into the conversations we were having to identify strategies and priority actions. And we're proud to be here today with a draft plan that reflects what we heard from residents like you throughout the county. Our next slide shows that expanding on this, you can see here by the numbers, a display of who we were engaging. Over the course of the past year, we've engaged over 3,000 touch points with stakeholders, residents, visitors, and staff. That includes engaging typically underrepresented groups like people of color, youth, older adults, as well as niche stakeholder groups around topics like riparian corridors, equestrian needs, and agriculture. Next slide. Through all of our listening, some themes truly rose to the top, such as maintaining and improving what we have, protect and restore wildlife habitat, sensitive ecosystems, and riparian corridors, continuing to provide new trail connections and recreation opportunities, and distinguishing priorities between urban and rural geographies. And it also included improving awareness of Arapahoe County open spaces and communications. We have learned a lot from these points of input about how people use Arapahoe County open spaces and what they appreciate about them, such as spending time in nature or wildlife, walking and hiking, places to spend time with family or friends. We also learned about what they would like for the future, such as environmental protection and agricultural land conservation. Now we'd like to take a moment and understand your relationship to Arapahoe County parks, trails, and open space with a polling question. So our question here is, how long have you been visiting Arapahoe County parks, trails, and open spaces? Press 1 for 1 year or less. Press 2 for 2 to 5 years. Press 3 for 5 to 10 years. And press 4 for more than 10 years. So again, that's 1 for less than 1 year, or 1 year or less. Press 2 for 2 to 5 years. 3 for 5 to 10 years, and 4 for more than 10 years. We're getting some responses to this question. And it looks like the majority are tending towards more than 10 years. So some longtime users, about 77% of you that entered off that. More entries here. And but we have a diverse set, even some that are less than 1 year who've called in tonight. Great, well, thank you for those responses. I want to share with you that some of our themes that we've heard that were important to stakeholders were protecting lands that preserve water quality, more opportunities for nature outings, cultural events, environmental and agricultural education, better connectivity between parks and natural spaces, and easier access to open spaces from residential neighborhoods. We'll pause here for a minute and go back to our moderator, and then we'll have Chris walk us through the master plan's objectives and priorities in more detail.
Thank you, Anna. Right now we're queuing up some questions. Perfect time for you to press *3 on your telephone keypad if you have a question you would like to ask during this live interactive call. So again, if you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And now, we'd like to get into the heart of the draft Open Spaces Master Plan. And to walk us through the specifics is Chris Geddes, a principal with Design Workshop. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you and good evening. We used what we heard in the research we conducted to craft the Master Plan objectives and priorities. Next slide, please. We will dive into each of these in more depth, but the overall objectives for the Master Plan are to provide equitable access to nature, maintain ecosystem health and resilience, support a sustainable system through programs, operations, and maintenance, align plans and policies to maximize the impact of open spaces, and protect the future of Arapahoe County open spaces system. Now let us see which of these you are most interested with this poll question. Which of the following Master Plan objectives are you most interested in? Press 1 for equitable access. Press 2 for ecosystem health and resilience. Press 3 for programming, operations, and maintenance. Press 4 for aligning plans and policies. And press 5 for preparing for the future. Again, those responses are press 1 for equitable access, press 2 for ecosystem health and resilience, press 3 for programming, operations, and maintenance, press 4 for aligning plans and policies, and press 5 for preparing for the future. And looking at the results that are coming in, a little bit slowly, we're seeing ecosystem health and resilience near the top, followed closely by preparing for the future. All right, next slide, please. So the first objective is to provide equitable access to nature. One priority to achieve this is by improving and increasing the number of places and activities for outdoor recreation and nature experiences. On this map in dark orange are locations where the master plan is recommending adding access to recreation, either through adding pockets of nature in urban areas, supporting parks and open space in developing areas, or adding recreation amenities to existing properties. These may include 1/4 mile walk gaps in places like Aurora and Littleton, new open spaces for developing communities near Bennett, and adding amenities to Kiowa Creek and Bijou Basin open spaces. The next priority for this objective is to extend existing trails and create new trails in order to complete a comprehensive county network. Seen in orange here are some opportunities to do that by maintaining the Cherry Creek corridor, connecting open spaces with new trail corridors along north-south riparian or corridors or waterways, creating new east to west connections, linking Kiowa Creek north and south with a multi-use trail, and creating new trails in the eastern portion of the county to connect rural communities to open spaces. The next objective we will discuss is restoring, conserving, and maintaining wildlife habitat. Seen here in green are potential priority areas. These include maintaining corridors such as the South Platte and Cherry Creek in urban areas, preserving corridors and their habitat in the eastern portion of the county, and maintaining large areas of intact habitat. Another way to achieve this objective is prioritizing the maintenance, conservation, and restoration of riparian corridors throughout the county. This may include education and stewardship opportunities in urban areas, using recreation trails for riparian restoration and maintenance, and conserving floodplains as urban development moves east. Next slide. We also heard loud and clear the importance of agricultural lands in the county. One of the priorities is to conserve agricultural lands, grasslands, and heritage areas. This map shows existing conservation easements in red, as well as potential new conservation area outlined in red on a portion of the State Land Board property east of Aurora Reservoir. One of the primary objectives for the future of the Open Spaces program is to bolster the programming, operations, and maintenance of the system. We have two main priorities for this objective: embrace programming as a key pillar of the Open Spaces mission, and grow maintenance and operations responsibly. This aligns with the public priority of take care of what we have. Now, another polling question, this time around programming and maintenance. Would you be willing to volunteer your time or more of your time to support Arapahoe County Open Spaces programming and or maintenance of properties? For instance, helping with a class or trail to clean up. I'll repeat the question. Would you be willing to volunteer your time or more of your time to support Arapahoe County Open Spaces programming and or maintenance of properties? For instance, helping with a class or trail cleanup. Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Again, that's press 1 for yes, and press 2 for no. Seeing some answers come in. Right now, everybody said yes. So thank you for your responses. Another priority that helps achieve one of the main goals of this process is to update the County Land Development Code to implement and adopt recommended code changes within 24 months of this plan's approval. This is crucial to make sure that future development supports or provides quality recreation spaces and conserves the type of lands that are important to county residents. We have heard clearly from residents that the open spaces system is important to maintaining the quality of life that draws people to and keeps people in Arapahoe County. In order to make sure that the program is sustainable into the future, it is a priority of this plan to reauthorize the open space sales and use tax to continue to provide funding for acquisition, programming, operations, maintenance, and the share-back grant funding to local municipalities and special districts. We know that different parts of the county have different needs, and this plan identifies different strategies across the county. In the western urbanized part of the county, the goal is to focus on partnerships with working groups and municipalities to close the gaps in the open spaces network. In the developing central portion of the county, the goal is to focus on land dedications and developer contributions to close gaps in the network. And in the rural eastern portions of the county, the goal is to focus on land acquisition, conservation easements, and grazing rights to conserve valuable open spaces. And now, back to Anna, who will wrap up the presentation.
Thank you. You can provide feedback on this plan by filling out the online questionnaire about the draft plan until April 13th. We anticipate the plan being adopted in July of this year. So for our final polling question, we'd like to know if, after this meeting, do you plan to go to the Arapahoe County Open Spaces website in the next few weeks and review the draft plan in more detail? Press 1 for yes, and press 2 for no. Okay, it looks like some interest in doing that with 78% of you responding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna and Chris. That was a lot of information. We'd like to now take some of the questions that folks on the line have. So if you haven't already, hit *3 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. Please do that now. Again, this is a live call with live questions and answers. If you have a question, now is the time to press *3 on your telephone keypad to be connected to an operator. So let's go ahead and start with the first caller. We've got Carol in Centennial. Looks like a question for you, Shannon. Carol, welcome to the call. What is your question?
Good evening. My concern is the homeless that seem to be everywhere lately, and especially in the park areas. Now, I doubt that Cherry Creek State Park is part of this, but the outlying areas around Cherry Creek, especially down Parker Road, the homeless encampments are literally between the street and the fence. So, I just wondered if the open spaces that you're going to have are going to have the same issues and what you're going to do to be able to control that.
Thank you, Carol, for your question. It's an excellent one. The homeless camps are a challenge for not just, of course, in our area, but throughout the metropolitan area. And what we've done is we've basically gotten together with a number of our partner agencies, our county departments, as well as some of the leaders within Arapahoe County to really start to work on finding solutions to mitigate some of these challenges. We partnered with the Sheriff's Office to help to do cleanups. We looked at various mitigation methods that we can use in the design of some of our open spaces, but it really starts with trying to make sure that some of these individuals have access to resources. We've got in the team that I'm working with we've got people from our housing department as well as our human services department, which helps to provide certain services, as well as with the various municipalities such as the City of Aurora, some of the outreach programs that are out there. So it's still one of those challenging situations that not only impacts us, but also our sister agencies throughout the metropolitan area, but we're still trying to work on it. When those camps are identified, our maintenance crews tend to try to help to clean things up and to make sure that things are restored. But it is an ongoing challenge.
Thank you, Shannon. Going back to the next question, we've got Maurice out of the unincorporated portion of the county on the line with us. Maurice, welcome to the call. Looks like you've got a good question for Glenn Poole. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, my question is that I think that with the acquisition we have, which is with taxpayers' dollars, they're purchasing land that was previously used for hunters, and you seem like you're allowing other people to use this land, and like the homeless and the farmers, the grazers and stuff like that, but you seem to eliminate all the hunters that are out there that would like to use this land, and it was previously good hunting land, some of it was, and we're talking about the rural eastern part of the county out here where the lands are different. We're not talking in residential areas. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Maurice. My name is Glenn. I'm the operations manager with the Arapahoe County Open Space. First of all, thank you for your question. And our department and the county is aware of the need for public hunting access and opportunities within the county, and we understand they are limited currently. As we develop our properties, we are going to be working with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife in the future to understand the feasibility of public hunting, both for youth and adults, and what those opportunities could be on the eastern plains of the county. And once we better understand that, the feasibility of those different types of hunting, whether it's big game or upland birds, and what the safety mitigations are, that's part of our process here for our master planning, and will also be part of our site planning for public use of the properties that we currently are working on to provide public access to. So more to come. I would definitely check out our website, go to the master plan page, and you can sign up for notifications at arapahoegov.com, Open Space Master Plan. And that will be a place that you can put your information in, Maurice, and we can keep in contact with you regarding future public hunting on our properties. Again, thanks for your question. Take care.
Glenn, thank you very much for taking that question for us. And as a reminder, if you have a question you would like to ask, now's the time to press *3 on your telephone keypad. Again, if you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Next up, we've got Linda joining us from unincorporated Arapahoe County. Linda, welcome to the call. Looks like you have a good question for Mr. Roger Harvey. So go ahead with your question, Linda.
Yes, I'm in unincorporated Arapahoe County near Cherry Creek Reservoir on the west side, and you have done a lot of work with creating more trails going south. There are so many bikers in Colorado. Everybody loves to bike, even in the winter. And are you planning to incorporate more biking trails, maybe some going east and west instead of north and south? Maybe even into the city areas more, or out towards, into Aurora. So that's my question.
Well, hi, Linda. This is Roger Harvey. I'm the open space planner with Arapahoe County Open Spaces, and I do a lot of trail planning. I didn't catch exactly where you were located.
Cherry Creek Reservoir, north of Arapahoe Road. So I'm
Okay, so
near.
sounds like you're in Centennia. Yeah.
I'm not in,
we
but I'm right by Centennial and Greenwood Village, in unincorporated Arapahoe County.
Sure. We do a lot of work with our jurisdictions in creating trails. In 2018, we created a bike ped trails master plan countywide that created numerous projects to help facilitate biking within the county. A lot of them are in unincorporated, but even more are in some of the jurisdictions and cities. And we are working to help implement the bike and ped plan. The best thing to do would be to take a look at the bike and ped plan to see where you're located and see what kind of projects that we identified in the bike and ped plan to help see what new projects might help facilitate biking within your area. Some of the things we do is help fund grants and fund the cities to build trails if they're not something that is in the unincorporated areas. But I'd be happy to walk you through some of the projects on a more specific basis closer to where you live if there's some specific hazards or impediments to biking within your area. We can look closer at that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. Is there a place where online someone can take a look at that biking ped plan that you mentioned?
It is. It's located on our open space website.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that additional information. Now, again, we've got open lines right now. If you have a question you would like to ask, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. This is a live, informative conversation, and the people with the answers are standing by the ready to give them. Next up, we've got Mark joining us from Aurora with a question here, I believe, for you, Mr. Carter. Mark, go ahead with your question.
Hi. So on page 125 of this lengthy document, you talk about the next steps, reauthorization of the open sales tax and use tax. And as I understand it, like 2003, it passed the first time with the voters, and it renewed 2013. Now we're going for 2023. But there's a line in there that really kind of concerns me. So why are you and the commissions pursuing a sales tax renewal of 20 years or more or forever? Why not leave it at 10? I guess I like the 10 because it sort of gives more transparency of what we're doing with our open spaces versus 20 years or 30 years.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that question. And of course, as you mentioned, you rightly pointed out that the first sales and use tax expired in 2013, and we asked for a renewal from the citizens to 2023. And what we're looking at is, of course, when you look at the use of those sales and use tax, local municipalities, towns, and districts certainly depend upon the tax for their parks, trails, and recreation programs and projects. Of course, when you build a park or when you purchase some open space, that's permanent. And so we need to maintain and make the improvements. And so really looking at it from the standpoint of having at least parts of the tax to stay around for a long period of time, because of course the improvements and of course the property will be a county responsibility for a good period of time. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at doing that. And of course, once again, when you think about how much money of this goes not just to the county, but also to the local jurisdictions, there are some cities that I've had some conversations with, and they've mentioned that they wouldn't have a parks department without the support of this sales and use tax. But this is something that we will be discussing in regards to what should the time period be for the extension. That has not necessarily been defined or decided at this particular point. The only thing that has been really recommended is that we go with a renewal or ask the voters for a renewal.
Thank you for your answer there, Mr. Carter. And I've got a question I'm seeing that was submitted online by Jake, and it's a good one for you as well, sir. The question is, what are your plans for open spaces in the eastern part of the county?
Well, thank you, Jake, for that question. As far as the eastern part of the county, of course, for those who are familiar with the geography of Arapahoe County, we're about 12 miles north and south and 80 miles east and west. And so really from E470 out east, we go close to about 50 miles. And so that's what we're talking about at this particular point. And of course, as you think about what the needs are, they're a lot different than the urbanized area. The urbanized area, of course, we do parks and trails and those types of things. But on the eastern part, our program really focuses in on three areas. One is land and soil conservation. Two is preserving wildlife corridors. And three is to really preserve our agricultural heritage. And what we've done with that in all three of those areas, we have over 3,000 acres that we've are responsible for in the eastern part of the Arapahoe County. And most of it is in the creek areas as well as drainage areas. And so those are prime habitat for wildlife corridors, for land conservation, so to speak. And on the upland parts of our properties, we've really partnered with local families, local ranchers for grazing and farming. And so we really look at those three goals to make sure that we've got wildlife corridors, that we preserve our agricultural heritage, as well as making sure that we're using, again, responsible land conservation and range management.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. And as a reminder, if you have a question that you would like to ask, all you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. So again, if you're listening to this live discussion on your telephone, just press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Now, if you are listening to this conversation through the website, you can enter your name and question below the streaming player. Again, if you're listening to this conversation on the website, just enter your name and question below the streaming player. Matter of fact, I've got another question submitted online. This one was submitted by Michelle. Looks like a good question for Glenn Poole. The question is, what is happening with the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds? Or Fair, I'm sorry, the Arapahoe County Fair.
Thanks, Michelle, for your question. We are in the process of planning our fair this year. It's going to be July 22nd through July 25th. This is the county's largest community event, and we are excited about bringing it back this year. We are in the stages of planning, as I said. In this day and age requires us to address public health guidelines, our visitor safety, and there's a number of precautions and best management practices that we're working through to plan the event, but it will be in similar fashion to our fair that last occurred in its largest scale in 2019. And we will be issuing more information. We do have a web page specifically for our fair, and that will be the location for our online ticket sales and more information about the events and activities that we will be hosting in late July.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Matter of fact, I'd like to hold you over. I think the next question is a good one for you as well. This question was also submitted online from Lana, who wonders, will hunting be permitted in the future?
As I mentioned previously with Maurice's call, we are in the process and will be looking at in the future the feasibility of hunting on our property. So there is potential for that. We do need to work with the Colorado Division of Wildlife, and also with our adjacent landowners and with each of the properties through our planning team as we develop them for public access. So hunting will be something that's considered for properties as they become planned out and open, and that goes through that process, and each property may have a different opportunities depending on the scale and where it's at in the eastern plains of the county.
Glenn, thank you for that answer. Next, let's go back to the phones, and we've got Mike on the line from Bennett, and it looks like a good question for Mr. Carter. Mike, welcome to the call. You're live. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you. We live about 3 miles south of Bennett, and we would like to know if Arapahoe County plans on using eminent domain to take property from private owners to use for public use.
Mike, thank you for that question. All of our open spaces purchases and acquisitions, as well as our conservation easements, our principal, and certainly all the things that we've done have been with willing sellers and willing buyers. And so we've not used that eminent domain for open space purchases or acquisitions. And so it really is a partnership between the existing landowner.
Thank you very much for that answer. Next, we've got another online question. And this question is from Lauren, and it's for you, Mr. Carter. How has COVID impacted your program over the past year?
Well, as Commissioner Jackson mentioned, we've seen a tremendous increase in the use of our parks and trails, especially from the standpoint of people that are utilizing the ability to get outside as opposed to being sheltered in place. Now, we've had a number of different impacts. Of course, early in the pandemic, we had to close down some of our playgrounds as well as do some other adjustments. Even from a practical standpoint, our maintenance crews, due to social distancing, we've had to basically, instead of having 2 or 3 individuals in a truck or a vehicle, we've had to kind of spread that out. So it really has impacted some of our maintenance and operations. Certainly when we think about the increased use, that means that the trash cans need to be emptied more, or trails and parks or trails really need to be cleaned up, and making sure that there's no hazards on there. So it has had an impact. And of course, throughout the metro area or throughout the country, of course, it's affected our work schedules. We've have a number of office staff that have been working from home. So much like many other organizations, we have definitely been impacted with the pandemic, but we've worked through a lot of those. We were able to, of course, put our IT systems in place to be able to do what we can from home. Again, we've made some adjustments to the way that we bring our maintenance crews together. A lot more folks are kind of working when it's safe by themselves, and perhaps maybe even taking separate vehicles to a location. And of course, we use the recommended personal protection in order to keep our staff safe, as well as being able to keep the public safe.
Thank you for that answer. So a reminder, if you have a question, now's a great time to press *3 on your telephone keypad. It'll put you in the question queue and allow you to ask your question live during this interactive call. So again, if you're listening to this conversation on your telephone, all you need to do is press *3 now to enter the question queue. If you're listening to this conversation through the website, you can enter your name and question right beneath the streaming player. Going back to the phones, another question here for you, Mr. Carter. We've got Mark from Aurora on the line with us. Mark, you're live. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, this is Mark. So what would happen to the land if the open sales and use tax fails in 2023? Does it revert back to the cities and municipalities for them to take care of, or what's our plan B, shall we say?
Well, obviously, if that happens, as I mentioned before, it would still be county responsibilities or the responsibility of the various municipalities or special districts, because they are owners. And of course, as I mentioned, the fact that these jurisdictions really depend upon this revenue, and without it, they wouldn't have the funds necessary to really maintain some of those. Our regional projects, such as the Highland Canal improvements, the Cherry Creek restoration projects, really rely upon this sales and use tax revenue. So those projects would be severely impacted, perhaps maybe have to be scaled back, or other sources of revenue that we would need to find for that. We'd also, of course, have issues with the lack of funding to do needed repairs, challenges in preserving environmentally sensitive areas throughout the county. So we would obviously need to take a real hard look at what we can maintain with other sources of revenue, and of course that would be severely impacted.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Moving on, we've got Shauna joining us on the line from Bennett with a question that Brett Collins is probably the best to answer. Shauna, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I was curious if you own land out on the Eastern Plains in Arapahoe County, can you donate your land to the open space so that it never gets developed?
Hi, Shauna. This is Brett Collins. Yes, that is something that we would definitely consider, depending on the property that you have available. And you can contact our Open Spaces office to talk directly to me, Brett Collins, there, and we could discuss that if you have a parcel that you're interested in donating.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm going to go ahead and call an audible here. I see a question that was submitted by Mike online, and I think, Mr. Poole, you should be able to answer this. The question from Mike is, I have an e-bike. Can I ride it on the trails? And what about e-scooters?
Thanks, Mike, for your question. The quick answer is yes, depending on the type of e-bike that you have. If it's a Class 1, it's something that is usable on our open space trails, especially our concrete trails that we have throughout the county. We've mentioned a few of those, the Cherry Creek Trail, the South Platte. There are several different other classes of e-bikes, depending on what the bike you have is. If it's a Class 3, there's some restrictions, and we follow the state with those types of restrictions on bikes, and that would also apply to e-scooters as well.
Thank you very much for that answer, Glenn, and clarifying it. So we've got another online question here. This one looks like a good one for Anna. It was submitted by Glenn, and he wonders who has the right-of-way on trails. So really kind of concerned about safety here, walking these paths with bikers, etc. So who has the right-of-way?
I think actually, Glenn or Roger, that might be a question for you.
Thanks, Anna. This is Glenn. I can definitely field that question for the caller or the person online. Bikers must yield to other trail users, and typically everyone yields to equestrian riders. We do have signs on our trails, and we're looking for ways to encourage folks to understand the rules of the trail and reinforce safety, trail etiquette. We also have signage that also allows folks to understand what the speed limits are on our trails, not only who yields to who, but what's the etiquette as far as speed on a bike, let's say. And we also have taken some other precautions to help folks better recreate on these multi-use trails. We have, like I mentioned, signage. We have some striping in certain areas. Again, speed limit signs and other information out on our trails that help folks understand how to be safe on a multi-use trail and what that looks like for different types of users.
Thank you very much for saving the day there, Glenn. I apologize for directing that to the wrong person. So we've got another online question, and I think this is a good one for Mr. Collins, who we just heard from a moment ago. This question was submitted by Blake. And Blake says, after moving to Colorado from Virginia, I was a little surprised about the lack of water-related activities on reservoirs and lakes. Cherry Creek is slammed with motorboats summer long, and I don't see a super safe place for SUP and kayaking. What do you think? Anything in the plans?
Well, Blake, we don't have direct plans for that, but the South Platte Working Group does have some plans that we're working with various municipalities on that will allow for better kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding along the Platte River, and that will be coming in the near future here. So that's really on their plans, and the county definitely supports that effort of that group, and will be participating in that. So that'll be another option for you in the county area. And then there's some other Reuter-Hess Reservoir, which is not in the county, that are open to that type of use as well if you're looking for something outside of the county or just within the area.
Thank you very much, Brett. Next is another online question, and this was submitted by Amy. And Mr. Poole, this one I think is in your wheelhouse. Amy wonders, can you outline volunteer opportunities with open spaces?
Certainly, Amy. We have a number of opportunities. We've mentioned several different aspects of our program, our operational program, from our heritage areas, which would include the 17-Mile House in the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds and the fair. And then we've also talked a lot about tonight our trails. So those are all areas where we have volunteer opportunities. We have a significant need at our annual county fair volunteering to help some of our heritage activities and some of the kids' activities that we have. Within our 17-Mile House, our other heritage site, we have a series of volunteers that do docent work, historical and cultural education for us. There's opportunities for volunteerism there. And then we have opportunities for folks to be what I would call trail stewards for us on trails that they may recreate on a regular basis. And then we also have one-time opportunities for larger groups when that's appropriate, hopefully soon here, for maintenance and operation activities. In the past, we've had groups, even corporate groups, do volunteer projects on our parks and on our trails as well. So we have a plethora of opportunities, and you can certainly look at those. We have a county volunteer coordinator, and we work with that person through our program. So there's a lot more information on the county website as well as our specific website for Arapahoe County Open Spaces.
Thank you very much, Glenn. We've got another online question, and this one looks like a good one for Mr. Carter. It was submitted by Jared, who asks, what is being done in the open spaces with people of color and veterans?
Thank you, Jared, for that question. In regards to people of color and veterans, one of the things, of course, that we do is we try to reach out to all of our communities through projects like this, the Open Space Master Plan, as well as when we do particular or specific master plans for properties. One of the things that we did, particularly in the 4 square mile area, where we have a wide variety of different ethnicities and nationalities, is that we really tried to work with the local communities. We use various different outreach methods, not just with in that area, but also throughout this process of using different languages, working with youth groups, working with communities of color. And then, of course, even during some of our activities, for example, with the fairgrounds at the county fair, we're looking at different cultural activities with the rodeos and with other entertainment. We've also done some outreach in regards to communities of color, in regards to utilizing the fairgrounds for a lot of cultural activities, such as quinceañeras, baptisms, and those types of things. And so we look at our programming as well as, of course, availability and looking at the needs of various communities from a geographic standpoint.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carter. And I'm looking at the clock. It looks like we have time for just one more question. It's another online question. And Mr. Poole, this one's going to come to you. What environmentally friendly measures are you taking on your properties?
Sure. And as we heard through one of our surveys earlier, a lot of the folks on this call are very much interested in our conservation and environmental work. We do have a number of places within our operations program where we strive to be environmental stewards and conservationists. One of those places, as everyone knows, in Colorado, water is very limited. And we have a significant program at our largest active park, which is called Dove Valley Regional Park, for saving water through a partnership with the City of Aurora. We also have a solar array that supports our ball field lighting at that same park. We utilize on our open space properties different types of integrated weed management, both through the treatments that we do and biological controls that we have utilized, as well as on the restoration side, we turn around and utilize native plant and seed collection and native ecotypes to do some of our restoration work on our properties. At our fairgrounds, one of our largest facilities, our event center has capacity for about half of it to run off a ground source heat pump, which reduces our demand on the grid. And we also have recycling programs at our fair, as well as LED lighting at our event center. So a number of things that we do to live out what we have in our mission statement and who we are as an open space program on a day-to-day basis within our operations group.
Wow, thank you very much for all that information, Mr. Pohl. And we have covered a lot of ground tonight, and our time is just about up. Right now, I'd like to turn things over to Commissioner Holen for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and thanks to our guests for providing such valuable information. We hope you've been able to clarify any questions or concerns you have. Those who have submitted written questions will be responded to online. We urge everybody to review the draft plan that is now posted online and to have a safe and healthy spring. Thank you again for joining this town hall, and we look forward to seeing you out on the trail. Dirk?
Thank you, Commissioner Holen, and thank you again to everyone for joining us on this call. As a reminder, we will post a copy of this recording to our website in the next 24 hours. Have a good night.